500 years ago, the entire known world lay between the Atlantic and Indian Oceans. This was the beginning of an extraordinary period in human history. Sailing first from Spain and then the rest of Europe came the explorers of the New World. Join Christopher Columbus, Hernando Cortes, Ferdinand Magellan, and 60 other explorers, and experience firsthand what this amazing time was really like.
Buongiorno. My name is Christopher Columbus. Click on me and I'll show you how I conquered the ocean sea.
I am Hernando Cortes, conqueror of the Aztecs of ancient Mexico. Click on me and hear my story and find out the ways of a conquistador.
I, Ferdinand Magellan, was the first to circumnavigate the world. Click on me to join me on my amazing adventure.
Sure, you heard about Columbus, Cortes, and Magellan. I sailed with all three, and many more besides. If you click on me, I'll tell you about some other explorers who didn't make it to the front pages.
Welcome to Explorers of the New World, where you'll join the greatest explorers in history in an amazing interactive adventure. Land on the New World with Columbus, conquer natives with Cortes, circumnavigate the globe with Magellan. Just click on an explorer from this screen to begin. The next thing you'll see is that explorer's personal map. You can click wherever you see a text label. Some clicks will take you to a short animated presentation. Other clicks will plunge you into a complete interactive world. Move your mouse around. Whenever a text label appears, there's something else to click and explore. Some objects have two levels of information. Watch the cursor. If it changes to look like this, you can click that object again. You can see more of the environment too. Just click the sides of the screen. To navigate through Explorers of the New World, use your compass. There are 5 choices. Main takes you back to the first screen of the program. Return takes you back one step to where you just came from. Help brings up the Help menu. Index lets you see every single place you can go in Explorers in an easy-to-use tree structure. Quit stops the program, but not before you meet some of the people behind the scenes. Columbus, Cortes, and Magellan are only 3 of the great explorers who set sail in those crucial years. Click Other Explorers to learn who else changed the map of the world. First, click on a barrel. Then, click the explorer of your choice. Want to read more about it? You'll find a complete database of explorers. Choose an explorer from the alphabetical list. Or conduct a search of your own. Every article that has the word you've chosen will be displayed. Want to put things in historical context? Choose the timeline. Then click the arrows to move forward and backward through time. How did the explorers affect the world today? Click Impact. Then choose an object to see how it's influenced what we eat or do. Explorers of the New World is full of surprises. If you're ready, go out and explore with the Explorers of the New World.
Before you lie the important places of my life. The grandeur of Ferdinand and Isabella's court. My legendary voyage aboard the Nina, Pinta and Santa Maria to the fabled islands of the Indies, and all my many adventures. Just click on a site to step into my world.
From the years 1492 to 1504, Christopher Columbus made 4 journeys to the New World. Click on the court to experience how it all began. Or choose a stop along the route map to join the adventure. Enter the New World to see what Columbus found. Or visit Rise and Fall for a glimpse of the glory and tragedy of Columbus's life.
My destiny was determined in the court of Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain. Please join me. I do not wish to be late.
Columbus paid his decisive visit to King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella in the fall of 1491. Here you will find many of the people who helped or hindered Columbus, as well as information about Columbus's world. Click around to learn more, or click near the left and right sides of the screen to walk about the Spanish monarch's dazzling court.
All the great navigators sailed east to the Indies, a long and arduous journey. I knew I could reach the Indies by sailing west, but convincing the right sponsor to pay for my voyage has been difficult. My previous audience with the King and Queen was a bit disappointing, but this time my proofs are indisputable. I pray they will agree. Your revered most Catholic Highnesses, allow me to present my plan. And so, in summary, as your most beloved, esteemed Highnesses can see, I present a journey that offers great rewards at little expense. And I only ask for 10% of any riches found, governorship of any lands acquired, knighthood, to be named Admiral of the Ocean Sea, all titles hereditary of course, and a little villa in the Spice Islands.
After Columbus's first audience with the Spanish monarchs, the Queen appointed one of her advisors, the monk Talavera, to head a panel of priests, astrologers, and scholars to investigate Columbus's proposal. The Talavera Commission considered Columbus's sources, and they rejected his proposition because they determined that the distance to landfall in Asia was too great. They were correct, and Columbus was wrong, except that the Americas lay in between. Ferdinand was a skilled diplomat who dealt with external politics and treaties with other European countries. But Isabella is usually portrayed as the stronger of the two Spanish monarchs. After commissioning Columbus's first voyage, she insisted that all revenues from future expeditions go to Castile, and that only Castilians be recruited as colonists. Before the marriage of Ferdinand and Isabella, Aragon and Castile were two separate Spanish kingdoms. When Ferdinand of Aragon married Isabella of Castile, they united their two kingdoms and formed the basis of the modern Spanish state. Luis de Santangel, the king's treasurer, was so wealthy that he loaned money to the king and queen. Queen Isabella would have rejected Columbus's proposition if Santangel had not advised her otherwise. In the 8th century, Muslim Moors conquered Spain. The Reconquista, or Reconquest, was the Christian Spanish struggle to oust the Muslim invaders and return Spain to Christian sovereignty. Christian fought Muslim for 700 years before the Moors were finally defeated. When the Reconquista was completed, many hidalgos were ready for new adventures. Fierce soldiers with an appetite for easy wealth, they became the conquerors of the New World. However, their wildness and their scorn for ordinary labor made them difficult to rule, as Columbus and later leaders in the New World discovered. From North Africa, the Moors conquered and colonized, building a powerful kingdom in Spain. For centuries, the romantic dream of the Reconquista occupied the hearts and minds of the hidalgos, young Spanish noblemen who sacrificed their lives for God and country. Gradually, piece by piece, they returned Spain to Christian rule. In 1492, the armies of Ferdinand and Isabella finally conquered the last Moorish stronghold of Granada. Now the monarchs could turn their attention to other ventures. Wars and the purchases of exotic goods from Asia had drained the treasuries of many European countries, including Spain. The need for wealth, both from commerce and from new sources of gold, stimulated the desire for exploration. Columbus's discoveries and Spain's success threatened Portugal. In 1493, to prevent any conflict between them, Pope Alexander VI divided the globe between the two countries. Each country would have exclusive rights of conquest over any non-Christian lands on its side of the line. But the Portuguese were still unsatisfied. In 1494, they pressured Spain to sign the Treaty of Tordesillas, which moved the line of demarcation 100 leagues west. That is why Brazil, when it was discovered, fell into the Portuguese sphere of influence. But was the Eastern Hemisphere included in the treaty? If so, where did the treaty line fall on the other side of the globe? These questions would have greater importance later. Europe's desire for Asian silk swelled in the 1400s, but only the very wealthy could afford it, because it was traded through Muslim middlemen who controlled the trade routes to Asia and levied high fees on all Asian goods. Columbus wanted to tap directly into this lucrative trade when he reached the Indies. Despite the intense rivalry between Portugal and Spain, the Portuguese ambassador often visited the Spanish court. Although the two countries were fierce rivals, they tried to avoid direct warfare. They even arranged a series of marriages between their royal families. But no union was successful, and the two countries remained in friction with one another. Spices from the Far East seasoned the dull European diet. They also masked the taste of foods beginning to spoil from lack of refrigeration, but the cost of spices made them a luxury only the rich could enjoy. The Inquisition investigated and punished religious heresy. It was often used by the Church to destroy rival Christian groups. Instituted by Pope Gregory IX in 1233, the Inquisition frequently used terrible tortures to force confessions. Punishments for heresy included execution, usually by burning at the stake. Victims who repented might be condemned to life imprisonment or receive a less painful execution. A single religious belief united all the kingdoms of Europe in the Middle Ages. Although Christian nations warred against one another, they all followed the Roman Catholic religion and shared a common hostility toward the non-Christian infidel.
August 24, 1492. I passed this night near Tenerife, where the great volcano on that island erupted in a fiery display.
Yow!
Many members of the crew were astonished and frightened, for they had never seen such an occurrence. I calmed them, and I explained the cause of this great fire.
How does a navigator on the open sea know where he is? Pick an instrument or map to find out how sailors navigated in Columbus's time. Columbus did not have a speedometer as boats and cars do today. To determine the ship's speed, a sailor threw overboard a wooden chip tied to a line. Another would call out a counting chant while the wood floated from bow to stern. They calculated their speed based on the time it took the wood to traverse the length of the ship. In Columbus's time, a sailor could determine his latitude by measuring the height of the sun or the North Star, using such instruments as the quadrant and the astrolabe. This is called celestial navigation. Here's how the quadrant worked. Its base would be aligned with the horizon, with the movable arm pointing at the sun or North Star. The arm of the quadrant would indicate the angle between the horizon and the star. Using this angle, the navigator could calculate his latitude on the globe. But celestial navigation was only partially effective. Instruments were inexact. If clouds obscured the stars and sun, a reading would be impossible, and there was no way to determine longitude. The most common navigational technique in the 15th century was dead reckoning. If a navigator knows his starting position, his direction of travel, his speed, and how long he is in sailing, he should be able to calculate how far he has traveled, and therefore where he is. But it does. The most common navigational technique in the 15th century was dead reckoning. The most common navigational technique in the 15th century was dead reckoning. If a navigator knows his starting position, the most common navigational technique in the 15th century was dead reckoning. If a navigator knows his starting position, his direction of travel, his speed, and how long he has been sailing, he should be able to calculate how far he has traveled, and therefore where he is. But it doesn't always work, because maintaining steady direction while sailing is difficult, and ocean currents also act on the ship, changing its position. Columbus is considered one of the greatest navigators of all time because of his excellent use of dead reckoning. A magnetic field flows around the Earth from the North to South poles. Columbus's compass contained a magnetized needle that would point to the Earth's North Pole. Once he knew where North was, Columbus could steer in whatever direction he wanted to go. But variations in the Earth's magnetic field sometimes caused a compass to point east or west of true north. Differences between compass readings and sightings of the North Star caused Columbus's men to become nervous. But Columbus had experienced magnetic variation on other journeys and was able to calm his men and guide his ship.
Monday, September 17th, 1492. I saw a great deal of weed today. I take this to mean we are near land. Some of the weed looks like river grass, stretching to the north as far as you can see. In some places, the weed is so thick that it actually held back the ships. We kept as clear as possible from those mats of weed. But in a way, this weed comforted the men, since they have concluded that it must have come from some nearby land.
I am having serious trouble with the crew, despite the signs of land we have seen. All day and night they complain that they will never return home. They say it is insanity and suicide on their part to risk their lives to follow the madness of a foreigner. I am told by a few trusted men that if I persist in sailing onward, the crew will throw me into the sea one night and say that I fell overboard. Since I am Italian by birth and not Spanish, little or no account will be asked of the matter. But with God's help, I shall persevere.
Columbus first landed in Navidad 2 months after setting sail from Spain. There he found a wondrous array of exotic sights, sounds, and natives. Explore this new world with Columbus by clicking with your mouse. You can enter the jungle and go even deeper.
Here, the fishes are so unlike ours that it is amazing, colored in 1,000 ways. And the colors are so bright that anyone would marvel and take great delight in seeing them.
Canoes existed in the Far East, but the Spaniards had never seen any before. Up to 100 feet in length, canoes linked the Arawaks to the other Caribbean islands. They were used for war and trade, as well as transportation. Roasted iguana was a favorite food of the Arawaks. Luckily for the Indians, the Spanish were repulsed by the idea of eating the lizards. As the Spanish plundered their other food supplies, they left the iguanas alone.
The song of the little birds might make a man never wish to leave. The flocks of parrots that darken the sun and the large and small birds of so many species are so different than our own, it is a wonder. The country all around the river is full of trees, beautiful and green and different from ours, each with flowers and its own kind of fruit. I never tire from looking at all the luxurious vegetation, which is so different than ours. You can even smell the flowers as you approach the coast. It is the most fragrant thing on earth.
Cooking was done in earthenware vessels and on grills over the fire. Barbecue is a Spanish word coined in the New World by the explorers who enjoyed the taste of grilled fish and meat. Cassava root produced a higher yield of starch per acre than maize, barley, wheat, or potato. Cassava bread, cake, and porridge supplied 70% of the Arawak diet. Arawak women made pottery from riverbed clay and baked finished pieces in the fire to harden them. Small barkless dogs and hutias, rodents similar to guinea pigs, were raised by the Arawaks for food. The Spanish eventually developed a taste for both of these, and today the dogs are extinct and the hutias rare. The Indians called their cigars tabaks. Columbus's first voyage introduced Europeans to the tobacco habit.
These people of the Indies are like children. I gave them red caps and glass beads, things of little value. It was a wonder to see how happy these trinkets made them and how quickly they have become our friends. It pleases me to have won their affection because we can convert them to our holy faith better by love than by force. They will make good servants too, because they carry out very quickly whatever tasks we give them. With 50 men, you could subject everyone and make them do whatever you wished.
Family units were mainly monogamous, with parents raising their own children. It was customary for a male cacique, or chief, to have more than one wife, as a sign of his status, and in order to produce more children. Usually, one wife was considered his chief wife. Hammocks for each member of the family were tied to supporting poles of the house. Father's was the highest hammock. Mom's was low, so that she could tend the fire. The children's hammocks were attached to the same pole as their mother's. Groups of families lived together in villages headed by a cacique or chief. The cacique might preside over a few families or several thousand. A carved stone mace and a cluster of colored feathers were the emblems of his authority. Chiefhood was usually hereditary, but a cacique could also be chosen for personal attributes. Men and women could both be caciques. The caciques organized work and other activities and rallied the tribe in times of war. They were called by ceremonial names such as Lord of the Rich Lands, Lord of the River, Lord of Peace, and Lord of Fruitfulness. Arawak religion was animistic, centered around the belief that all inanimate objects have a soul or spirit. Worship consisted mainly of supplication and small offerings to the zemis, small idols representing different spirits. Arawak Indians were very peaceful and had little use for weapons. Bows, arrows, and spears were used only for hunting. On Columbus's landing, one Indian grabbed at his sword, probably attracted by the shining blade. Ignorant of the danger of sharpened steel, he unwittingly grabbed the edge and cut his hand. Arawak mothers carried their babies on their backs, strapped to boards, while working inside or outside. As they moved, the baby's head smacked against the board and fashionably flattened its head. Arawak Indians subsisted mostly by farming. Agricultural methods were simple, and the whole community worked together to plant and harvest the crops.
Hola! This is the life, right? We all thought he was crazy. Who could say where the Indies really were? But it is so nice here. And the Indians, They are so friendly. I like being an explorer. Some of the food they eat is disgusting though, eh? Like white worms and bugs and lizards, like little dragons. Iguana they call them. Ugh. But they do make a good sweet wine, and we have learned to smoke an enjoyable herb. Tobacco, it's called. Have we reached the islands of the coast of Asia? Or have we found the Garden of Eden?
Arawaks drank a wine made of fermented cassava. Old women would chew cassava bread until it was thoroughly mixed with saliva and then spit into an urn. After 2 or 3 days, it turned alcoholic. The language barrier kept the Spaniards in blissful ignorance of the winemaking process, and they enjoyed the Arawak drink with relish. The Spanish sailors found the native women friendly and responsive to them. However, they soon ceased to differentiate between willing and unwilling women. Thus, rape became one of the first forms of violence done to the Indians. Columbus is remembered for the glory of his first voyage when he discovered the Americas. But Columbus made 3 other voyages, and his star did not always shine so brightly. Page through these chronicles to read of his ascension to glory and subsequent descent into despair. Click on the buttons to learn more.
Since I returned from Asia, I have been the rage of Spain. The king and queen now address me as Don Christopher, and the rest of the court call me Admiral. The nobles are fascinated by the strange birds and plants I brought with me. At my homecoming banquet, the king even tasted food from my plate, an honor reserved for those closest to the throne. My second expedition will include 17 ships and 1,200 men. They will call me Admiral at sea and Governor of the new lands.
Christmas Day, 1492. As the Spaniards prepare to return to Spain, the Santa Maria runs aground in Hispaniola. It cannot be repaired. Seeing in this a sign from God, Columbus establishes a settlement there. He names it Navidad, in honor of the Christmas holiday. The colony will be a trading outpost to allow the Spaniards to continue searching for the riches they knew they'll soon find here in the East. Leaving the settlement behind, Columbus sails back to Spain with the Nina and Pinta and most of his men. Columbus returns a hero from his historic voyage. Ferdinand and Isabella eagerly plan his next expedition, which will establish colonies to harvest the anticipated riches of the East and begin converting the crown's new subjects to Christianity. In September 1493, 17 ships sail from Cadiz, carrying 1,200 men.
These heathens attack us, but it's my men who are to blame. Each looks only to increase his own fortune, even at risk to the group. When I tell them to be patient while searching for gold, they don't listen. Instead, they attack the Indians, and when they find no gold, they rape their women. Is it a surprise that the natives attack us?
Columbus's second expedition reaches Hispaniola. Instead of the Spaniards they left behind and stores of gold, they find nothing. The settlement is gone. The Navidad colonists, bored and failing to find gold, had plundered and raped. The Indians grew tired of the Spaniards' abuse and decided to rid the island of the strange bearded white men. No one was spared. Now Columbus begins building a new settlement, which he names Isabella, after the Queen. As soon as he can, he sets off to explore further, leaving his brother Diego in charge. Spring and summer, 1494. Leaving the new settlement in the hands of his brother, Columbus sets off to explore Asia. Everywhere he sails, he finds friendly natives, but no gold. No signs of the riches of the Indies. More puzzling, nothing matches his charts of Asia. Where is Japan? Where's the mainland, the seat of the great Khan's fabulous wealth? Sailing along Cuba's long southern coast, he believes he has found the mainland at last. He stops just short of the island's tip, where he forces his men to swear in an affidavit that they have indeed located the Asian mainland. (1494 to 1496). While Columbus was busy exploring, the settlement at Isabella was not faring well. Columbus's glowing reports had led the colonists to expect immediate wealth and to assume the natives would work for them. But living conditions are primitive, food supplies limited, and gold scarce. More and more restless, the colonists ransack native villages for easy spoils. The natives respond with hostility and attack them. Then disputes over booty and native women lead to infighting among the Spanish themselves. When Columbus returns from his 5 months of exploring, he's unable to bring the situation to order. (1495). Columbus, frustrated at the small amount of gold he finds, thinks of other money-making schemes, like enslaving the natives. Against royal wishes, Columbus sends 500 slaves to Spain for sale. But slavery profits would not fill the royal coffers. Gold must be found, gold mine or not.
Has anyone ever heard of such injustice? I delivered the Indies to the king and queen, yet I am arrested like a petty criminal. Let them bury me in these chains as a sign of Spain's ingratitude. Anyone who has eyes to weep, he should weep at all the abuse I have suffered.
(1496). When stories of chaos in the new colony filter back to Spain, the monarchs send investigators. Many colonists, disappointed by the lack of easy spoils as much as by Columbus's faults, use the opportunity to slander Admiral Columbus. Columbus sails to Spain to defend himself against accusations of mismanagement. He finds that enthusiasm has waned at court because the colonies have not produced the expected wealth. Not until 3 years later do the monarchs outfit Columbus for his return journey. August 1498. Columbus returns to Santo Domingo, but the colony does not prosper. Meanwhile, disturbed by continuing reports of disorder, Isabella and Ferdinand send Royal Commissioner Francisco de Bobadilla to investigate. De Bobadilla finds such extreme turmoil in the colony that he assumes authority by force in the name of the crown. He arrests Columbus and his brother Diego, the acting governor of the colony, for incompetence.
For months, we've been stranded, waiting for the new governor to send a rescue ship. I wrote to the Queen about the gold fields here. I haven't actually seen them, but the natives told me you only need men to mine the gold, but not nobles. Only settlers who know how to work. And after we get the gold, we'll find the mainland. The Chinese will welcome us. But first, I have to get off this island. You know, some people say we haven't found Asia, but an unknown continent. But I know the truth. We are in the Indies.
Fall, 1502. After the Portuguese explorer da Gama found an East Sea route to India in 1500, the Spanish monarchs decided to seek a western route once more. Columbus had been begging to sail again, so they outfitted him with 4 broken-down ships. Believing he is sailing along the Malay Peninsula, Columbus explores up and down the Central American coast, looking for an opening onto the Indian Ocean. Natives describe many gold fields inland, but Columbus does not check the truth of their stories by exploring on land, and as a result, misses the chance to discover the Pacific Ocean. Instead, pounded by fierce storms, he gives up and heads for Spain. March 1503. Abandoning his search for a passage to the Indian Ocean, Columbus heads for Spain. But his ships are leaking and on the verge of collapse, forcing him to run aground in Jamaica. There, his unhappy sailors mutiny and plunder native villages. The friendly natives turn hostile and refuse to supply the Spaniards with food. Columbus's knowledge of astronomy saves them. Knowing that a solar eclipse is imminent, he warns the Indians that if they don't provide food, his god will take the sun away. When the eclipse begins, the frightened natives appeal to Columbus. Once they swear to provide supplies, the sun brightens again. (1503 to 1504), shipwrecked in Jamaica, Columbus sends a sailor in an Indian canoe to Hispaniola to request a rescue ship. Contemptuously, the governor waits 7 months to send help. Rescue ships finally take the crew home in June 1504. Isabella, Columbus's champion, had died a few months before his arrival in Spain. The men who rebelled against Columbus's authority in Jamaica go unpunished, a final insult to the admiral. Columbus continued to plead for a chance to explore further, but he never sailed again. He died in Spain, still convinced that he had made 4 voyages to Asia.
As a youth of just 19, I sailed from Spain to Cuba. Click on a site and learn how I overthrew an empire of millions with only a few Spanish soldiers. Or click on my horse to join my campaign.
In 1521, with only 600 Spanish soldiers, Hernando Cortes conquered the mighty Aztec Empire. How did he do it? Click a site along the campaign route to learn more. Soldiers, not farmers or working men, first came from Spain to the Americas. They were looking for adventure and for gold. They conquered all of Hispaniola by 1496 and all of Cuba by 1515. Then they established the Spanish stronghold of Darien on the mainland. In 1519, Diego Velázquez, the conqueror and governor of Cuba, dispatched 3 expeditions to explore the mainland further. One of these expeditions was led by Hernando Cortes, history's most famous conquistador. By 1550, most of South America had come under Spanish dominion. Cortes's assignment from Governor Velasquez of Cuba was to explore the Yucatan and make contact with the Aztecs. But the ambitious Cortes had aims of his own, conquest and gold. Suspicious of Cortes's enthusiasm, Velasquez tried to stop him after he left, but Cortes, picking up recruits and supplies at ports along the way, eluded him and pressed on. With 10 ships and 600 men, Cortes finally landed at Chichen Itzlan on the Yucatan coast. Within 24 hours, runners had informed the Aztec Emperor Moctezuma 260 miles away.
I ordered my men to act peacefully, hoping to convince these natives to accept Spanish rule without a fight. But they threatened that if we did not leave, they would have to kill us. So they attacked and, well, we killed many. This made them understand it would be better for them to accept us with peace. Then they bring us food and 20 slave women. One of these, Malinaldi, she will be very valuable. I christened her Marina. Who is this Moctezuma? How large is his empire? Why does he call me Quetzalcoatl? Does he think I am a god? I would like to be his god. What does this god look like, Marina?
I am the daughter of a Mayan noble, a great man. But when he died, my mother was forced to sell me as a slave. The Aztecs ruled us then. They were only a crude tribe from the north. But their gods became strong, and they conquered other tribes to feed the blood hunger of their god Huitzilopochtli. I hate them for what they did to the Maya, to the Totonac, to the Tlaxcaltec, and to me. You will wear black, Quetzalcoatl's color. I will teach you who the Aztecs will fight and who they will serve. You will learn how to make them serve you. Now we shall see whose gods are the strongest.
As soon as we landed at Yucatan, I could see the Indians were richer and more sophisticated than those on the islands. Their clothing, their weapons, their well-built houses. Then the emissaries arrived from a king named Moctezuma, who ruled over them in an empire as big as Spain. The emissaries brought gold and exquisite jewels for us. They are rich and powerful, and yet they are frightened. I can see it in their eyes. They call me by the name of their god, Quetzalcoatl, and watch closely to see how I respond. They do not know who or what we are. My mission is to scout the land, but I believe I can do more. Marina has told me many of the tribes will be my allies against the Aztecs. Yes, I think perhaps I can deliver these lands on a golden platter to His Majesty, King Charles of Spain.
Soon after Cortes landed, Moctezuma's emissaries arrived, bearing fabulous gifts of gold, jewels, and featherwork. Their mission was to discover the strange visitors' strength and to appease them in case they were gods. Cortes sent the gifts from Moctezuma directly back to Spain, bypassing Velasquez, the governor of Cuba. It was an act of rebellion. When men loyal to Velasquez revolted, Cortes brutally put down the revolt, and then destroyed his own ships to ensure there would be no turning back. Lured on by Cortes's promises of unbelievable wealth, his stunned men started their march inland. Cortes and his new Indian allies traveled inland towards Tenochtitlan. Through the reports of spies and runners, Moctezuma watched their progress nervously. Cortes believed that the Tlaxcaltec Indians, enemies of the Aztecs, would ally themselves with him. However, the fiercely independent Tlaxcaltecs attacked the Spanish instead. Although the Tlaxcaltecs had nearly 30,000 warriors, the Spanish, with only about 600 soldiers, won many of the battles. This convinced the Tlaxcaltecs to join them. What weapons and techniques did the Spanish and Indians use in their battles? Click a weapon to learn more about it. The crossbow, designed to penetrate European steel armor, was unnecessary against the Indians. It was also clumsy to carry, slow to load, and quick to rust. However, the Spaniards used it throughout the conquest. Before the final siege of Tenochtitlan, Cortes asked the Texcoco Indians, his allies, to manufacture extra arrows for his men. They made 50,000, of better quality than the European ones. The natives had never seen horses before. When the Spanish charged on horseback onto the battlefield, the Indians were stupefied. Many thought that the Spanish were centaurs, horse and man in one body. Some Indians committed suicide from fright. Seville steel cut easily through the Aztec cotton armor. The superiority of the Spaniards' swords to the Indians' obsidian blades was so great that the Spanish later forbade any Indian from owning a Spanish sword. The Spanish arquebus was an unwieldy gun and only partially effective. Loading was too slow for the close confines of the Indian battlefield, and the parts tended to rust up in the tropical damp. But the sound of the guns caused the Indians to panic and reinforced the notion that the Spanish were not normal men, but some form of god or demon. Macuahuitl were wooden swords with obsidian or flint blades fitted along the edges. With this sword, an Indian could chop off a horse's head in a single blow. One Spaniard said, "They cut like a razor from Tolosa." The atlatl, or spear thrower, threw oak darts that were either barbed or pronged at the end. With a range of 200 feet, they could penetrate steel armor and deal a fatal blow. The barbed darts were especially dangerous because they had to be cut out of a victim's flesh. The tepoztopili were spears with stone blades sharp enough to shave with. These were used for both thrusting and slashing. Closely set stone blades formed a continuous cutting edge. Taking captives was a key goal of Aztec warfare. Killing the enemy on the battlefield meant you couldn't sacrifice him later. This practice gave the Spaniards plenty of time to cut down their Aztec adversaries. The Indians first subdued an enemy soldier by knocking him off his feet. Then he was bound and led to the rear for later sacrifice.
Last night in Cholola was a bloodbath. We gathered the Indians together in their temple courtyard and we ran them through. We had to kill them because they were planning an ambush. Later we heard there was no ambush planned. It was a mistake. Bad interpreters. That's life. But do you know what our native allies did? They took away their victims and ate them. They are so bloodthirsty, these heathens.
As Cortes marched inland toward him, Moctezuma decided he must offer these bearded white men hospitality. After all, they might be gods. So when Cortes and his men arrived in Tenochtitlan, the regal and bejeweled Moctezuma greeted them and housed them in a palace. But Cortes was nervous. Could it be a trap? Soon afterward, Cortes suddenly took Moctezuma prisoner. Still trying to appease them, Moctezuma lavishly entertained his captors and allowed them to loot the Aztec treasure stores. Then Cortes assembled the Aztec nobles before Moctezuma and demanded that they become vassals of Spain. Weeping, Moctezuma agreed. Cortes converted the great Aztec temple to a church, destroying the idols and halting all sacrifices, and began to take over the city. His victory was nearly complete when news came that Spanish ships had arrived on the coast to arrest him. The palace of Moctezuma was a testament to Aztec culture and ingenuity. Explore the palace by clicking on People and Objects, or click near the left and right sides of the screen to reveal even more. Within the military, different costumes and badges reflected the rank and achievements of a soldier. The Jaguar warrior earned his knightly status by taking high-status captives in battle. Jaguar warriors came from the upper echelon of society only. Their battle costume was designed to terrify opponents. Excellence in battle was one way to advance in Aztec society. Teenagers learned to fight by following an experienced warrior to battle. A youth would cooperate with a group to make his first capture. Then he could shave off most of his hair as a sign of prowess. When he took a captive single-handedly, his hair was shaved entirely, then allowed to grow in again. His face was colored red, and he received an orange cape and other symbolic clothes. After taking 4 captives, he was considered a seasoned warrior. This distinction exempted him from certain duties, including paying taxes. The Aztecs collected tribute from 400 subject cities every 80 days, including huge quantities of cotton cloaks, feathers, and logs. The noble classes came to depend on exotic imports, such as green quetzal feathers, chocolate, gold, jade, and amber to maintain a luxurious lifestyle. Even the poorest regions paid tribute. If they had nothing else, they might send bags of a type of lice used in making red dye. Tribute, trade, and slavery supported the Aztec Empire. Each subject kingdom was expected to send foods and some luxury goods to the capital as tribute. These might include wood from the mountains, flint and obsidian from the northeast, and clay, salt, and reeds from the lake region. A wide variety of local and foreign goods were sold in the great market of Tenochtitlan, including chocolate, jewels, skins, birds, feathered war tunics, jade or turquoise beads, and manufactured amber. Most goods were bought through barter, but cocoa beans, cloaks, and quills full of gold dust served as currency. Boys followed the same profession as their fathers and were also encouraged to become great warriors. Girls were trained to weave and care for the home. When children misbehaved, they were punished harshly. A 9-year-old might be bound and pierced with cactus needles. An older boy would be beaten. All Aztec children were sent to school. Upper-class boys went to a strict boarding school called a Calmenac, or House of Tears, to learn law, music, art, religion, astrology, and how to calculate the calendar and interpret dreams. Lower-born children learned trade and were taught natural history, including the types of animals, trees, and herbs. Women of all social classes in Aztec society spent their days at home, weaving, caring for children, and preparing meals. They could own property, conduct lawsuits, and participate in trade, either in manufacturing or selling goods. Some women served as priestesses. Women who died in childbirth were thought to go to the same heaven as warriors who were sacrificed after capture. The Spanish were impressed with the Aztec codices, beautiful books painted on wild fig bark paper or deerskin. Codices communicated everything from simple messages to history and religious mythology. Spanish priests considered the codices idolatrous and burned many. Later, they commissioned Aztec priests to make new ones, to retain a record of the Aztec history. In Aztec religion, each profession, and even every food item, had its own deity. There were about 1,600 gods in total. Magnificent temples were built to the gods, who battled with one another for supremacy through elaborate rituals. The main god of the Aztecs was Huitzilopochtli, or hummingbird warrior. He was the god of war, and also was identified with the sun. The Aztecs believed that Huitzilopochtli died every night and needed a constant stream of human blood offerings in order to be reborn. To keep the sun alive, the Aztecs pricked their ears or tongues with the needles of the maguey cactus and offered the drops of blood to the sun god. The life of Moctezuma's court was dazzling. He was served 100 dishes at each meal. Dwarves, jugglers, jesters, and musicians entertained him. He was carried everywhere he needed to go, and his subjects were forbidden to look at him above his sandals of gold. Despite all of Moctezuma's wealth and power, however, he was prone to attacks of depression and uncertainty. At the sacrificial ceremony, the priest plunged a flint knife into the victim's chest and pulled out the still-beating heart. The victim was then thrown down the temple steps. The heart was burned on a brazier, and the limbs were ceremonially eaten by nobles. The skull was kept on a rack, and the blood used in other parts of the temple service. The Aztec goal on the battlefield was to take prisoners for use as sacrifices. The gods needed human blood to survive, so thousands of victims were sacrificed each year. Therefore, the Aztecs fought what they called flowery wars, wars whose main purpose was to capture sacrificial victims, not for military conquest. One advisor to the Aztec emperors recommended that they always allow one or another nearby kingdom to remain independent. The Aztecs would fight with them to take prisoners, who could be used to satisfy the gods' needs for sacrificial blood. Aztec priests took vows of asceticism and celibacy. They offered their own blood to the gods by pricking and cutting themselves. Their ears were tattered from ritual self-mutilation. Their skin was pale from blood loss, and their hair was stiff with the blood of sacrificed victims. Cortes had long defied Cuban Governor Velázquez, who was his superior. This was treason, and Velázquez now sent a 900-man force to arrest Cortes. Cortes set out from Tenochtitlan to confront them. For the first time on American soil, Spanish fought Spanish. Cortes bribed many of his pursuers to his side. Then, after he captured their leader, the conquistador Narváez, the others agreed to join with him. Enthralled by Cortes's stories of the riches of Tenochtitlan and his easy conquest, Narváez's men set out with him to return to the capital. While Cortes was gone, the men he had left behind in Tenochtitlan attacked an Aztec religious ceremony, slaughtering 600 Aztec nobles. Now the Indians were shocked out of their passivity. When Cortes returned with Narváez's forces, the Aztecs allowed them to enter the silent and watchful city. Then, led by Moctezuma's brother Cuitlahuac, they attacked the Spaniards' palace. Cortes ordered Moctezuma onto the roof to calm his people, but the furious mob stoned the emperor, killing him.
The Aztecs have taken up arms against us. We are surrounded and cannot fight a whole city from here without food and water. We have no choice but to retreat. We will escape by night under cover of darkness, but we will return and they will feel our Spanish steel against their flesh.
Help Cortes and his men escape from Tenochtitlan. Click a number and answer the question. If you answer all the questions correctly, you'll be safe outside the walls of this city on the lake. You have never been in a city as impressive as Tenochtitlan, and you hate to leave. What does Tenochtitlan have, which no other European city does? What about Notre Dame or the Parthenon? That's right. No European monarch had yet thought to create a pleasure garden of exotic animals, the forerunner of the zoo. You really don't like fighting and maiming that much. You decide to sneak out of the capital dressed like an Aztec peasant. What is the most important thing to remember when creating your disguise? Yes, in Aztec society, only the upper class wore robes or clothing longer than knee length, and peasants were forbidden to wear sandals in the presence of their superiors, which meant anywhere in public. You're really too fair to pass for an Aztec, so you decide to go with your unit. Cortes is now organizing the Spanish and their Tlaxcaltec Indian allies for the escape. What part of the procession would you rather be in? The Tlaxcaltecs were just about as hated by the Aztecs as you are. The fighting will be fierce next to them. Absolutely. If anything still impresses the Aztecs, it's the Spanish horses. Besides, they're a faster form of transportation. While filing quietly through the dark streets, with the horses' hooves muffled, you pass by one of Moctezuma's treasure houses. Cortes might confiscate any gold, so you'll take something the Indians value and sell it to them. What will the Indians pay the highest price for? You got it. Green was considered the most beautiful and revered color by the Aztecs. And bright green quetzal feathers and jade were two of the most desirable ornamentations. You've almost reached the edge of the city. Which of the approaching Indians can you fight with your sword? That's the one. Makwawitl are heavy, flint-edged clubs. The Aztec using one can't fight as nimbly as you. You can get in close and slice him. The lake is now swarming with Aztec war canoes. You are outnumbered 10 to 1. You and your Indian allies are falling like flies. Aztecs surround the causeway and even climb up for hand-to-hand combat. Moving forward looks impossible. What is your best option? In the Aztec revolt that followed Moctezuma's death, the Indians forced the Spaniards to flee Tenochtitlan, those who were able to escape. But the Spanish had lost only a battle, not the war. Many new adventurers now arrived from Cuba to join Cortes's embattled forces. They brought with them exactly what Cortes needed for victory: ammunition, fresh supplies, horses, and smallpox. The disease quickly spread through the countryside. Reaching Tenochtitlan by October, thousands of Indians died in agony, leaving their lands undefended. The Aztecs' imperial policies had been cruel. Now, in their hour of greatest need, all former allies and vassal tribes refused to help them. In fact, many tribes, seeking revenge, joined with Cortes to destroy them. With 850 Spanish soldiers and 60,000 Indian allies, Cortes prepared his final assault. Meanwhile, Tenochtitlan was being destroyed by another invader, smallpox. The emperor Cuitlahuac had died from it, and a new emperor, Cuauhtémoc, was crowned in his place. For 4 months, the Spanish laid siege to the city, cutting off its food and water. On June 10, 1521, almost a year after he had been forced to flee Tenochtitlan, Cortes launched his final offensive. The Aztecs fought valiantly in fierce house-to-house combat, but at last they were forced to surrender. Cortes razed the city and built another on its ruins. The Aztecs, as a nation, had ceased to exist. How does one nation conquer another and build a new society in its place? Each piece of the puzzle before you represents one aspect of conquest and colonization. Click and drag the pieces onto the puzzle and see how the Spanish constructed a colonialist society in the New World. How did the conquerors balance the need to protect the Indians with the desire to exploit them? Blatant abuses of the Indians by the colonists caused Spain to enact the laws of Burgos in 1512. The laws prohibited the worst mistreatment of Indians and appointed inspectors to make sure that settlers did not abuse or oppress them. But by the time these laws were fully enforced, millions of Indians had died of disease and overwork. Once you've conquered people in a war, what can you do with them? The Spanish organized all conquered Indians into encomiendas, villages or groups of villages supervised by a Spanish overlord. This overlord, or encomendero, provided protection and a Christian education to the Indians, who worked the land for him and paid tribute in food. The effect was to reorganize native society and culture. Is it morally justified to conquer another people? Church leaders saw conquest as good because it rescued the Indians from paganism and converted them to Christianity. But then they had a moral dilemma. Was it right to exploit these new fellow Christians as a workforce? Was it permitted to take their land and plunder its resources? The debate raged on both sides of the Atlantic. One way to promote your culture within a conquered nation is to intermarry with them. Many of the Spanish men who settled Mexico left their families behind and took Indian wives or mistresses. Their children became a new race of people called mestizos, who were brought up in Spanish culture.
Domine Spiritus Sanctus inspiratione exulte Deum labora Dominus Spiritus Sanctus inspiratione exulte Deum.
When my ships sailed around the globe, we joined East and West and taught the world it was one. Click on a site or click on my ship and come with me on this historic voyage.
In 1519, Ferdinand Magellan set out from Spain on what he thought would be a short journey to the Spice Islands. In fact, the arduous trip took 3 years and cost the lives of Magellan and most of his crew. However, his expedition achieved something unique, proof that it was possible to circumnavigate the globe. Click on a site to learn what happened along the way.
Why should I, a Portuguese of noble lineage, serve the Spanish crown, you ask? What good was my noble title, except to sit at court flattering greater nobles, hoping to be noticed? No, that was not for me. I longed for adventure. I served Portugal for 10 years, in India and North Africa, fighting the Moors. I have scars and medals to prove it. And yet when I came home, King Manuel put me on a pension, the same as youths with downy cheeks, and announced in court that he had no use for me. Serve any king you want, he said. Some people called me a traitor for serving the Portuguese rival. No! I was loyal to a man who did not know how to be a master. The treason was his. And now I am proud to serve good King Charles of Spain, and I will do so till my last breath.
Magellan arrived in Spain in 1517 with a brilliant proposal for young King Charles I. The Spice Islands lay within Spain's sphere of influence, Magellan said, but the established route there lay under Portugal's control. Using a bit of false advertising, Magellan claimed that he knew where the straits were that would allow them to sail west through the New World into the Pacific. From there, they could easily sail to the Spice Islands. King Charles of Spain agreed to give him 5 ships, the Trinidad, the San Antonio, the Concepcion, the Victoria, and the Santiago. Magellan's fleet left Spain in August 1519. King Manuel of Portugal, furious at Magellan for undertaking a voyage of discovery for Spain, sent warships to arrest Magellan for treason. Magellan, knowing his danger, avoided the Portuguese ships by sailing down the African coast, figuring to head west at the Atlantic's narrowest point. But he had led his fleet into equatorial doldrums. No winds blew in the still waters. The other captains, all Castilians, grew angry at their Portuguese leader. Finally, westerly winds rose, only to blow them into fierce storms. The electrical charge in the air created balls of sparks that made the masts look as if they were on fire. The crew believed that the glowing lights were saints protecting them. This phenomenon is known as St. Elmo's fire. In December 1519, the fleet reached the coast of Brazil. Magellan's men were tired and hungry after the difficult crossing. The Tobojo Indians were exceedingly friendly. They traded food for trinkets, and sailors could purchase unmarried girls for a knife. The men enjoyed the tropical paradise. On December 27th, rested and with their food supplies replenished, they prepared to resume their journey. From January until April 1520, Magellan's fleet sailed south, looking for the straits that would lead them into the Pacific. Storms battered the fleet. The weather grew colder. Food ran low. Magellan decided they must settle in for the winter. From the beginning of the journey, tensions had mounted between the many Castilian nobles aboard and the foreigner, Magellan. Now unhappy with Magellan's decision to spend the winter on the freezing coast, some captains and officers mutinied. They took over 3 of the 5 ships. Magellan put down the mutiny with ruthless efficiency. First, he sent a messenger with a hidden dagger to slit the throat of Captain Mendoza of the Victoria, one of the ringleaders of the mutiny. Then he blocked the exit to the bay where they were anchored, trapping the other 2 ships. Because Magellan had worked closely with his crew and won their respect, most remained loyal, and the mutiny crumbled. The Spanish named the land Patagonia, after the Patagons, the large feet of the natives. This tall race wrapped their feet in hides, creating gigantic footprints. So the misconception arose that the Spanish had met a race of giants. The winter of 1520 was a hard one. The men suffered from hunger and from bitter cold. But Magellan looked after his crews carefully, and most of the men survived the winter. As they were ready to leave their winter quarters, Magellan's smallest ship, the Santiago, was destroyed by a storm. Magellan's reduced fleet now resumed the search for the strait that would take them into the Pacific Ocean. On October 18, 1520, Magellan's fleet resumed its search for a strait. Within 3 days, they found the opening. 2 ships sent ahead to scout reported that the waters were rough, but the strait continued as far as the eye could see. The shores along the strait were lit by many small fires, so they named the lands Tierra del Fuego, the land of fire. These waters were later named the Straits of Magellan. Some of the men feared that Magellan would lead them to their deaths in the icy waters. The crew of the San Antonio overpowered the captain and sailed east out of the strait under cover of night, heading for Spain. Magellan waited in vain for the San Antonio to return. Had she crashed against the rocky shores with half of their food supplies and a third of the men? After many days, the ship's astrologer cast a horoscope and told Magellan that the men had deserted them.
Life aboard the ship is not for everybody. Even before all the meat rots, you have to watch the bugs dancing on your biscuit or on your head. Yes, we have plenty of bugs. We have fleas, weevils, lice, maggots, and we have rats. Big ones that we can hunt and eat. Some say the captain is nuts, and that we shall never find the passage to Asia. But men have died for mutiny, huh? So I keep my thoughts to myself. I just wish for some warm weather, and that maybe we shall meet some friendly natives.
Welcome to the Trinidad, Magellan's flagship. Let's take a look at some of her major features. There were usually 3 masts on a ship this size: the main mast, the mizzen mast, and the foremast. Sails were attached with horizontal or diagonal yards. The rudder was attached to the rear of the ship. The helmsman would sit in a small compartment and steer according to instructions called to him through a hatch by the pilot. Before there were clocks, time was kept aboard ship with an ampoletta, or hourglass. The ship's boy on watch duty turned the ampoletta every half hour when it ran out. Magellan ships carried only a few cannon, but their impact on natives was impressive. Stews were cooked in the fogon, or firebox, each day around noontime when the watch changed. This was the sailors' main meal of the day, and usually contained beans or chickpeas and rice with a small amount of salted meat. Because the ship's water quickly turned putrid, wine was a big part of the daily allowance. Sailors were allocated as much as 2 liters a day per man, and most of the men worked slightly drunk all day.
First, some teeth fall out from scurvy, and then hardtack breaks out all the rest. If we fall asleep on watch, we are whipped. I sailed with Columbus and fought for Spain as conquistadore, but those were tea parties compared with this. For 3 months we are sailing in a void. Nobody knows where we are anymore. We would eat each other if the Capitan would allow it. We will never make it. May God have mercy on our souls.
After 2 months at sea, Magellan's men had run out of food. In order not to starve, they had to find unusual food sources. Can you find anything to eat? They did. Click around with your mouse.
We were so hungry. Often we ate sawdust from the boards. Even disgusting vermin could provide nutrition to a starving man. Rope is made out of dry vegetable elements. It wasn't very nutritious, but it was chewed by us deliriously hungry men. We ate biscuits turned to powder, all full of worms, and the urine which the rats had made on it, for they had eaten the goods. Rats were sold for 1/2 ducado apiece, and even then we could not get them. We also ate ox hides that covered the top of the main yard. These had become exceedingly hard because of the sun, the rain and wind. We left them in the sea for 4 or 5 days and then placed them for a few moments on the embers, and so ate them.
In March 1521, after 4 months of starvation at sea, Magellan's fleet sighted Guam. After skirmishes with natives there, they pushed on to an uninhabited island in the Philippines to nurse the sick. Soon visitors arrived from nearby islands. To everyone's amazement, Magellan's slave Enrique, who was born in the Philippines, could understand their speech. If he had come home, that meant the expedition had reached Asia. Magellan had achieved his goal, to reach the east by sailing west. Columbus's dream had at last been realized.
We survived a hellish journey to reach these new regions unheard of by Spain. I have claimed these lands for the crown. Now the Spanish will reap great profits, and I too will get my portion, for myself and my heirs. What good and intelligent natives we have found here. Humabon, the king of this island, has converted to Christianity with all his nobles. He has been quick to receive the Spanish rule and proven to be a good friend, especially when I provided him with the appropriate encouragement. But now we must show him that we Spaniards can be good friends. Spain will rule by making Humaban the lord of the surrounding areas. Chief Lapu-Lapu has been rebellious, I don't want to spill blood. I have no intention to abuse these poor, naked savages. But they must know who is the master.
Local chieftain Lapu-Lapu had defied Magellan's authority and refused to recognize the rule of the Spaniards' native ally, King Umabon. Magellan led an expedition of 60 of his men to teach Lapu-Lapu a lesson. Magellan expected an easy victory over the naked natives, but the battle was a disaster. 1,500 natives bombarded the Spaniards with arrows and rocks as they waded ashore, and the Spaniards could not use their guns or crossbows because of the terrain. Most of the men ran back to the boats, leaving Magellan and 8 others exposed on the beach. After Magellan was wounded, the natives surrounded him and stabbed him to death with their spears. Magellan's death at the hands of Philippine King Lapu-Lapu was a tragedy for his expedition. First, their ally, Umabon, turned against them, slaughtering several of Magellan's officers in a surprise attack. There weren't enough sailors left to man the 3 remaining ships, so the Concepcion was burned and her men divided between the Victoria and the Trinidad. In early November 1521, the 2 remaining ships finally arrived at the Moluccan island of Tidor. Al-Mansur, the Raja of Tidor, agreed to trade their goods for a large load of cloves, a precious commodity in Europe. The 2 ships were loaded with cloves and ready to depart when disaster struck again. The Trinidad's seams burst. The Victoria would have to leave without her. The Victoria departed for Spain by the shorter route around Africa. 4 months later, after repairs, the Trinidad set off in the opposite direction to cross the Pacific, aiming to avoid the Portuguese. Its goal was the Spanish settlement at Darien in Panama. But they hit monsoon season as they sailed north. The cold winds devastated the Trinidad, and supplies ran low. The ship turned back toward the Philippines to resupply. Of the 54 men who set out, 32 died of starvation and scurvy on the return trip to the Philippines. In the Philippines, Portuguese ships captured the Trinidad and imprisoned its crew. Only 4 of the Trinidad's men ever made it back to Spain. In December 1521, under the command of Captain Sebastiano del Cano, the Victoria headed for Spain with 47 Europeans and 13 natives aboard. Although they started the journey well supplied, by the time they reached the Cape of Good Hope, their meat and other foodstuffs had rotted. Yuck. Subsisting on rice and water and suffering badly from scurvy, the men avoided landing in order not to be at the mercy of the Portuguese, who controlled the area. But finally, in desperation, they landed in the Cape Verde Islands, claiming to the Portuguese that they were returning from the Indies rather than from the disputed Asian lands. But when some of the sailors used cloves for trading, the Portuguese officials realized their identity. To avoid capture by the Portuguese, the Victoria sailed off in a hurry, leaving 13 of its men behind. In September 1522, almost 3 years after Magellan set out, the battered Victoria sailed up the Guadalquivir River to Seville. Though only 1 ship had returned out of 5, its load of cloves was in those days so valuable that the expedition still made a modest profit. Of 285 men who had set out with Magellan, only 18 had survived. These survivors had accomplished something new in human history, a voyage circling the globe. Not only was the world round, but it could be circumnavigated. At last, the true outlines of the Earth could be known. During the 3-year voyage, Magellan's wife and son had died. The Victoria's captain, Del Cano, received great honor, but no heir of Magellan's ever received the money and spoils due him. Magellan's only legacy was his heroic deed and the new knowledge that he had contributed to human understanding. The age of exploration was filled with new discoveries and political upheaval. This timeline will show you what world events were taking place when the explorers embarked on their travels. Click the arrows to move the timeline backwards and forwards. Pizza without tomatoes? Clint Eastwood riding a llama? The items brought back by the explorers from the old world to the new, and from the new to the old, completely altered life all over the planet. Click on an object to see its impact on life today. Several North and South American tribes used tobacco for ritual and medicinal purposes. The explorers introduced it to Europe, where it became popular and proved to be one of the New World's most important cash crops. The pineapples indigenous to South America were exported to many tropical areas and are now an important Hawaiian crop. The turkeys native to America became a favorite food of the European colonists. And without turkeys, what would we do with all our stuffing? Corn, or maize, was the main crop of many Native Americans. Corn grows well in places that are too wet for wheat and too dry for rice, so it could be cultivated in fields previously thought unsuitable for farming. Today, corn is an important food for both man and animals, and is used in producing the gasoline substitute, gasohol. The Aztecs introduced the conquistadors to the pleasure of drinking chocolate. The Spanish in turn improved this drink by adding sugar and vanilla. Later, other Europeans developed ways of producing solid chocolate for eating. In addition, they introduced the cocoa bean to Africa, where most of the world's cocoa is now grown. Once thought to be poisonous, tomatoes found in the New World became an integral part of Spanish and Italian cooking. Today, who can imagine a pizza without tomato sauce, let alone a hamburger without ketchup? On early ships, lack of space forced the sailors to sleep out on deck, exposed to the elements. When the Spanish saw the hammocks of the Native Americans, they realized these beds could be used to make room for the entire crew inside a ship. When the explorers brought potatoes back to the Old World, Europeans discovered it was far more nutritious than any of their native crops. Potatoes helped feed a population boom, especially in Ireland, where it was adopted as the national food. In the mid-1800s, when their potato crop failed, many Irish were forced to emigrate, particularly to America. The Spanish were not able to establish a direct trade route with the Spice Islands, but they did bring back some Native American spices. Paprika is the best known of these and became a staple of Hungarian cooking. There were few places in the New World where the Spanish olive trees could prosper, and shipping them was notoriously difficult. But when 3 of these trees finally did make it to Chile and Peru, they formed the basis of a large olive oil industry. Starting the morning with a cup of fresh coffee is a habit many have grown accustomed to. Although the coffee North Americans drink was probably grown in Latin America, it didn't exist there until the explorers brought it over from the Old World. Many explorers and early settlers realized there was money to be made in the New World from farming. The first important money-making crop brought from the Old World to the New was sugar, which grew well in the hot, moist climate of the Caribbean islands and South America. Few Europeans, however, were willing to labor in the fields, so slaves were imported from Africa to work the fields. The Europeans brought to the New World a variety of deadly diseases, especially smallpox. Some historians estimate up to half the native population died in epidemics. This greatly reduced their ability to resist the European conquerors. Unlike many other European products, the local inhabitants enjoyed raising and eating the pigs brought over from Europe. The Aztec noblemen especially enjoyed pork, because it reminded them of the taste of human flesh, which the Spanish had outlawed. The huge American grasslands proved ideal grazing ground for Spanish cattle. These cows, raised in the New World, were a vital source of food for local gold miners. In addition, the hides of these cows were a profitable export item. The surplus cow fat was a cheap source of candles, which until then were considered a luxury. Early on, the explorers realized that the hot, humid climate in much of South America was ideal for raising the bananas native to Africa. Nowadays, Central and South America are the main exporters of the fruit. The horses brought to the New World by the Spanish thrived in the American plains. Soon, vast herds of wild horses roamed the entire continent. Native Americans learned how to use these horses for working, hunting, and fighting. It's hard to imagine an Apache warrior without his favorite horse. Spaniards would never consider their meal complete without a good bottle of wine. If they hadn't insisted on bringing this crop with them to the New World, we wouldn't have the famous wines of California's Napa Valley. After you've chosen an explorer, click on a place shown on his map to learn even more. Vasco Núñez de Balboa was the first European to see the Pacific Ocean. His skill in dealing with native peoples and his popularity with his men threatened his superiors, and he was executed on false charges. Vasco Núñez de Balboa was the first European to see the Pacific Ocean. Driven by a desire for fortune and fame, Hernando de Soto helped Pizarro conquer Nicaragua and Peru. Later, de Soto led an expedition that discovered the Mississippi River.